So you didn't know which juror was asking the question, but read it. And what I noticed was there were highly intelligent questions, very specific. I remember one about an unspent bullet, very scientific. So it said to me, wow, they're paying attention, they're paying attention. And there were a lot of questions. And to me, it also says they're doing their job. Let's say they go through their notes, because it's a long trial and you forget what you've heard. So it makes sense to think, okay, let's all go back in, let's ask the judge instead of just guessing if we don't know the answer.
Absolutely. And to that point, Allie, the question of can we see Exhibit A, B, or C, that's telling on some level, but it also is the overarching message: we're working, we're making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And questions like that tell you that they are still going through, perhaps in chronological order, the evidence as it was presented. If they're later on in their deliberations, sometimes they start asking questions about the law that the judge gave them during instructions. I'm not sure here if anybody knows the answer. Some judges will send the written jury instructions or charges back with the jury, and some expect the jury to sit there and listen to them verbally only. I'm not sure which is the case here, but to me, when we have factual questions or exhibit questions, that tells me we're still early on in the process. When they start asking questions that apply to the law as they were provided it, that tells me that they're getting closer to getting to that ultimate question. Very curious to see which of these two, or maybe it's something different, this is.
Yeah. I'm 90% sure, after talking to Rick Rundy this week, that they do have a copy, because we were actually talking about the bizarre practice in some jurisdictions where the judge rattles off a gazillion instructions over 45 minutes, and then they don't have a copy of it. But in Massachusetts,
happens in my
yes,
jurisdiction regularly. It's very frustrating.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Randolph, any when you are sitting there as an attorney, you hear there's a question. When you get it, when your phone rings and you are on, what's it like as you wait? You've done all your work. There's nothing you can do. What is that gut-wrenching hour, day, like 2 days, 3 days, when you're just waiting?
Oh, it's painful, because you're sitting there on pins and needles, and then you hear something from usually a bailiff or a sheriff will come to you and say, oh, we have something, right? And then all of a sudden you get your client, if they're not locked up. If they are locked up, you maybe go downstairs, tell them there's some information. You go back up in the courtroom, and the judge may say, oh, we just have a question. And then you read that question at sidebar, you go up to the bench and read it, and you say to yourself, like I said earlier, what does this mean? Or, oh, I get this. I understand where they're going now. I think they're leaning our way. And then you start thinking, okay, judge, you say to yourself, how do I argue to the judge to craft the answer to this question that may help our case moving forward?
Yeah, there's gamesmanship for sure, Allie, because the answer can be just as important sometimes as the question, and you can fight.
Yes, and that may be what's happening right now at sidebar is there's collaboration. Okay, what is this question? What are we trying to get at? And also the judge is going to help guide the parties and have discussions about the appropriate way to answer it. You can never tell a jury what to think. You can only guide them. You want to respond directly to their question, only to their question, and not give additional information. Really important there. You have to be really careful in the way that we answer those questions as well. And the responses, I believe, should be made a court's exhibit along with the original question. So if there are any issues that come up later on down the road, say in the event of an appeal, that all of that is properly preserved and made part of the record.
Yeah, good point. Susan, we've covered the cases, the families.
Yeah.
This is gut-wrenching. We've all gotten close to families that are on both sides. Sometimes it's the defendant's families, sometimes it's victim families, but the families are going through a process that is so foreign when they walk into it, and then so gut-wrenching. And a moment like this for the Clancys, I'm sure their heads are spinning.
And I was thinking just now about how telling that was. You see the Clancys kind of stretching their necks and looking over and thinking, oh my gosh, what is going to happen to my daughter? What am I going to see from their facial expressions, from their body movements? And of course, with the question, and I go back to Delphi because I was there for so long throughout the trial, and the families were just so nervous, and there's ups and downs, and you have to stay within the vicinity of the courthouse, and it's very nerve-wracking, but at the end you have to trust that the jury knows what they're doing, obviously takes this very seriously. Reddington did say that, thank you for your service, as the judge did. And you can tell, as you said, Ted, you were in that courtroom, you saw the jurors, and they're attentive. They're taking notes. They care about this because think about it, her life obviously is in their hands, and they have to live with whatever decision they make.
Okay, it's breaking up. We understand it has something to do with medications, and Judge Sullivan has crafted a response from people in the courtroom.
We have to address?
Telling us, let's go back in.
All right, so we'll be in recess on this matter at this time. Thank you.
Court, all rise.
Okay, they shut us out. They didn't tell us what the question was. However, according to our team in the courtroom, they pulled out an evidence bag with some medication in it. Judge Sullivan then was seen crafting an answer, and both parties seemed to be in agreement. In the estimation of our reporter in the courtroom, the Commonwealth seemed maybe a little bit happier, a little bit more of a pep in their step as they walked away from that sidebar. Some more questions than answers from the first question. All we know is they've had a question just shy of 4.5 hours. Boy, quick reaction here. Allie, Randolph, and Susan, I guess not much to react to. Allie.
Do we know why they do not have the exhibits back in the deliberation room? That's a question I have. I don't know if anybody can answer that, why they're not sending everything back, because if not, this may keep happening. If they have to come out every time they want to see something and send a note out, that may be a little bit inefficient. I've never seen that done before. Usually everything goes back with them. Curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the volume of evidence here is fairly large. But Randolph, yeah, you would think that they could bypass that. Your thoughts of the fact that we don't know anything, really, except that there was a question.
Yeah. Well, and I think to answer Allie's question is there's probably just so much to it. Maybe they have a small deliberation room. Ted, your notes from Rich, the photographer, saying there's something about the medication bag, if I remember correctly, that's something that Reddington brought out during closing. So again, reading tea leaves, are they going back to Reddington's closing and saying, he made some good points there. Let's look at this medication bag. Maybe this is important to us making a decision here.
Okay. Yeah, and that was in the context of they didn't seize it, they didn't take it, they didn't test it, they didn't do anything with it. In fact, it was found after the house was released, after the initial investigation had released the house back to the family. So let's get a break. When we come back, we got something to talk about now. The jury had a question. We don't know what the question was, but they are hard at work. 4 hours, 30 minutes. Almost. A live look outside the courthouse in Plymouth. They're back working inside. We're back right after this.
did nothing wrong in her life.
We're here to support Lindsay.
You are a biased weasel.
She was having intrusive thoughts herself of harming the children, correct?
Correct.
So why did she specifically do it? She was depressed. She was exhausted. She was done. She didn't want to try anymore. She felt damaged.
Welcome back to Court TV Live and our continuing coverage of deliberations in the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. The jury just had their first question. This is a live look inside the courtroom. Moments ago, the Judge Sullivan, came out on the bench. Immediately, the parties went to sidebar, and then that was it. They crafted a response, sent it back in. That's all we saw, was basically the seal. And when they walked up to the sidebar, Sierra Gillespie was in the courtroom and saw some other things. I guess a bag, evidence bag, medicine. Just take us through it all, because of course we just saw the seal.
Yeah, so there was a jury question. I was hoping that things would be discussed, and they were. They just weren't discussed in front of us. They're at sidebar, so the white noise is playing. We can't hear exactly what they're saying, but here's what I saw. That the evidence bag, this is the one that I believe Kevin Reddington had in his closings. It's a large Ziploc baggie with a bunch of prescription pills in it, okay? So that is brought up. It's the judge and both sides there discussing. We've got the bags right there. The judge eventually writes something down on a piece of paper. Both sides read it, obviously. They nod their heads in agreement eventually. The prosecutors looked pretty happy after whatever was decided and all of that. And it's unclear whether this bag was taken back to the jury room, but I could infer that their question had something to do with this piece of evidence, the prescription pills.
Interesting. And the Reddington, any reaction? He's kind of
He's got a
every
good poker
sidebar.
face.
Yeah, he walks out of every sidebar with that look to us.
Yeah, I don't think he's phased. I think his feathers have not been ruffled. He's like, okay, accepting whatever the question is. But the prosecutors did look happy.
Interesting. And family, did they get in? Were they in there for the question?
Family was in there for it. And when the sidebar is over, when court is back in recess, everybody needs to leave the courtroom immediately. All the reporters are asked to leave. So we kind of shuffle out. That's why I wasn't able to see, did this go back to the jury room. But I did overhear the bailiff speaking with the Clancy family saying, or excuse me, Lindsay's parents saying, you guys can stick around, hang out for a minute. So they did hang back in the courtroom after all the media was asked to leave.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sierra. We'll see where this leads. Of course, this was the first of anything since this deliberation began. You did mention, we should go back and remind everybody that when Judge Sullivan took the bench this morning just after 9 o'clock Eastern time, the jury was brought in, and you did notice some things.
Oh yeah, definitely. This morning the jurors came back in. They looked very well rested. I mean, I'm sure that they were discussing things yesterday. It was about 3 hours of deliberations that they had, and I don't know if they talked in the courtroom and said, hey, let's all go to bed early or what, but they came back and they looked very well rested. I also will note that some of the people previously, I mean, most of them were dressed very nice, but very casual. You know, this is just another day. But today, people who I'd seen previously wearing just a t-shirt and jeans now are wearing a polo, now dressed up. People look very nice today. And I know that sometimes that could be an indication. Maybe they're getting closer to a verdict or a decision of some sort. And I mean, you know that they're deliberating, right, Ted? Because they are asking this question about the evidence.
Yeah, and it could, you know, it's Friday. It's a beautiful weekend predicted here weather-wise. They may be thinking, all right, 4:30, we're headed to the Cape. You know, who knows?
They're dressed for it, too. They're just very nautically New England. They look great. They really do. So maybe they want to wrap it up and then head off to the Cape.
Did you notice the foreperson at all? She's my favorite juror, of course, now that we know that she's foreperson. She's the older woman, late 60s, who definitely was engaged through from start to finish in this trial. Anything stand out from her? Was
Yeah.
she leading the crew in? Or?
It is, it is interesting that she's the foreperson because she has been taking diligent notes. She's been paying attention throughout all of this, dressed very nicely today, very put together, not leading the charge to have everybody come in today. She's not like, waving the flag, taking everybody in. But I think you can tell she's the foreperson. She's the one who's going to give us eventually whatever the result is. And I guess she is leading them in a way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The foreperson leads the discussion, and obviously every jury is different. Every deliberation room is different. But from your vantage point, it doesn't look like there's any issues. People seem, as you put it, well rested and a team. Because a lot of times you'll see factions. One group comes in, the other ones will trail, and you see them interact, and it's little bunches.
It is kind of funny to see because they all walk in line. They haven't until deliberations been able to discuss this case, but you can tell that they're friendly with each other. I'm sure that they've passed each other or had lunch. Maybe they're talking about their kids, things they're allowed to talk about pre-deliberation. And you can see some of them kind of nudging each other or smiling or whatever. They have their little inside jokes. So I do think after 5 weeks, they've at least made kind of friends more than acquaintances at this point. They've gone through a lot together, more than we have. I mean, they've seen the autopsy photos we haven't been privy to, the 911 call. I mean, so they are kind of, I don't want to say trauma bonded, but they went through something big together, and now they finally get to talk about it.
And talking to other jurors that have served in long cases, you can't talk about the case, but you talk about your families, your friends, your shared experiences. These are people that likely, some of them will stay in contact possibly for life. It is a bonding experience, to your point. The crowd, or lack of, outside the courthouse here, this is a different case. It isn't Karen Reed by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, not at all. I mean, this is a case that has captivated the world. People are watching from all over, and they're doing it at home. But as far as coming in person, not so much. I mean, we did see more people here for closing arguments yesterday, and that makes sense, right? Today, we don't know if there could be a verdict or it could just be another day of deliberation. So we haven't seen that many spectators in the courtroom. But to your point, Ted, there really hasn't been that many people out here. I mean, last Thursday, I believe it was, when everybody wore the pink in support of Lindsay Clancy, I've seen a few stragglers here and there, maybe 5 people a day who are like, pro-Lindsay or anti-Lindsay, but really not as many as you would think. I think it's just the tone of the case. It's a lot more somber. It's not, it's people are compelled to watch it and they're interested, but it isn't fun.
No, it is absolutely heartbreaking. No matter where you stand, those 3 children lost their lives, and the mother has garnered a lot of sympathy, empathy for different reasons. And so, yes, you're right. It's just different. And that Thursday was a scheduled event. Here we're going to rally and be here and blah blah. It is different, and we haven't really seen. The other part of the equation is the courtroom's huge. They can fill a lot of seats. So in other trials with small courtrooms, people were forced to mill around because there's nowhere to go. Here they have an overflow room and a huge courtroom. So anyway, just part of the scene here in Plymouth County. Sierra's going to be going in and out of the courtroom for us.
I'll be running back and forth all day. Any news, you're the first to know.
All right. Sierra Gillespie, host of Scandal, the podcast. Sierra, thank you. Let's get a break. When we come back, we'll continue to go over the evidence that the jury has seen, that we've watched on television, and what do you think is the most important? Was it Patrick? Are they thinking about him? Are they thinking about those experts? We'll talk about it when we return. 4 hours, 42 minutes, and counting. Stay with us.
That is the defense, and we don't, obviously Mr. Reddington wasn't showing any emotion, is that they are wanting to see all the different medications she was actually on, and that how serious was it? How deep was she into this mental health treatment? So it could cut both ways. It's hard to tell right now.
Allie?
Yeah, I agree. Difficult to know what they're thinking. There was also some discussion about whether she was being dishonest with her providers, and that the pill bottles, according to Jennifer Sprague, could provide some insight as to that. Perhaps the jury may be wondering, was she, do we want to compare what we see in the medical records to what we see in those pill bottles to determine whether she was intentionally withholding information or making misrepresentations? Does that matter in their analysis? But I keep coming back to, if the issue really is, was she criminally responsible, there really has not been an argument that the lack of criminal responsibility comes from an over-medication, but rather from an episode of psychosis. So I'm not sure exactly what to make of this question, and I know it's not fair that we don't have the actual question, but I agree with Randolph's analysis. It could go one way or the other, and honestly, the answer is we just don't know. But I wonder if it has to do with her disclosure to her providers and her truthfulness.
And Susan, that was a big part of the Commonwealth's case at the end, is that through their experts and then in their close, she wasn't honest. This woman who's supposedly super honest and is a great mom and great nurse, she wasn't honest about something that was very important and you could argue may have saved the life of her children. That was, she wasn't forthcoming about the ideations of harming her kids, except for to Patrick and her mother the one time, but not to the providers. And because she knows the system, the allegation is, if she'd have been honest, they'd have taken the kids. Well, if they'd have taken the kids would be alive. And the jury has to factor that in.
Yeah, kind of putting the blame on her, saying that this was up to her, that she was a labor and delivery nurse for 9 years, and so she should have known better. She wasn't up front. But also, during the defense, Reddington's closing argument, him holding up that bag, his story was, look, she had a wonderful life. She did nothing wrong. And then because of this, which I thought was powerful, that big bag of pills that we saw, once she met Dr. Tufts, her life was not good anymore. So to me, it would seem like this was positive for the defense, but you never know. As Sierra said, that the prosecutor seemed happy about the question, but maybe Reddington is always a straight face, and you never know how to read him. He always seems consistent. But I think it could be a big part, either way, of the defense. Was it her fault? Did she not take them? Or was she prescribed that medication and she trusted the medical field, which failed her? We've heard that time and time again.
Randolph, if she was the problem in terms of her lack of disclosures, if she made bad decisions during her downward journey, does it matter if at the end of the day she was in psychosis? The jury's got to decide yes or no, are you criminally responsible? And whose fault is it that she got to that point? If they think she got to that point, well, that's really why we're here, correct?
Yeah, and that's a fine line, I think, that Kevin Reddington was trying to walk in this trial. He wasn't trying to hammer the failure of the medical care system and the doctors that were treating him too much. He certainly mentions it, he alludes to it in his closing, but he doesn't want to shift too much that blame on them, because at the end of the day, he wants to say this is a Lindsay Clancy issue. This is something she was dealing with, and that psychosis came on right at that moment when obviously Patrick had left the house. So, to answer your question, is it something that they're focusing on here? It's hard to tell.
Yeah. Allie, I hate to come back to this, but you are the only one that I know that has a little bit of insight, and that you were going through an issue with postpartum depression after the birth of one of your children. The navigation of that journey has to be scary, and there are no clear answers, or correct me if I'm wrong. From your perspective, what she did or didn't do, is it her fault?
So it's not her fault, right? Like, let's start there. It's not her fault. And let's be clear, everybody does not experience any illness or depression, especially mental illness, in the same way. And so the question is really not about was it her fault, but I think where the prosecution was trying to focus in was she claims to be compliant with her treatment. She claims to be seeking help. She recognized she had a problem, but then when people offered help, she did her own thing. She failed to follow directions. She wasn't taking her medication. And that's why they're trying to put the focus on she's using the cry for help as an excuse for premeditated murder. But at the end of the day, if she was experiencing postpartum depression that somehow turned into postpartum psychosis, and she was not in a place at the time that she took her children's lives to be able to appreciate that what she was doing was morally wrong, that it was against the law, then it doesn't actually matter how she got to that point. The question is, was she criminally responsible in that moment? That's the ultimate question.
Yeah, but jurors likely could get derailed by the thought of, hey, if I was her, I would have, because that's what jurors do. They put themselves, they're not supposed to, but they do it every time. They put themselves in the defendant's chair and say, well, here's why I would never do that. Oh, I would never associate. In this case, there was nothing except that. That is what they could be focusing on, Susan, to say, well, had I been going through that, I would have been honest, and I would have told my providers what I was thinking.
Yeah, I've done the same thing, kind of putting myself in their shoes. I remember having my daughter. No one really asked any questions about that, how I was feeling. Fast forward 7 years with my son, and there was a form of kind of a happy face and a sad face, and you're supposed to circle that. But I think that women are connecting online and sharing their stories through this case and saying enough with the shame, because I think women, and it's great that Ali's speaking about it, don't talk about their stories. They feel shame, they feel blame, they feel like something's wrong with them. And that's what I believe that she has come, Lindsay, to represent, the truth for many women. And that's why I believe you see women, or you did outside of that courthouse, in pink. And I see online people sharing their stories saying, this happened to me, I'm from this state. So in a way, it opens the conversation around the trial.
Absolutely. If nothing else, this trial has put it front and center and educated a lot of people and motivated a lot of people. I met a woman who drove here from Indiana just because she felt it. She said, I just had this urge to be here because of her journey with mental health. So let's get a break. When we come back, we'll continue to monitor, wait patiently. If we hear anything, we'll let you know. Almost 5 hours, 4 hours, 56 minutes and counting. Our continuing coverage continues and will continue until the jury goes home or there's a verdict. Stay with us. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ted Rollins outside the courthouse in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where the jury has now been out for 5 hours deliberating the fate of 36-year-old Lindsay Clancy, the labor and delivery nurse who killed her 3 children in the basement of her home, strangling them to death with exercise bands. It is a horrible case. The children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, 8-month-old Callan, lost their lives at the hands of their mother. The defense is trying to convince, did try to convince the jury during the evidence that this was a case of a woman in the throes of psychosis. Part of the most heartbreaking part of this case was the beginning. First, you had Patrick Clancy take the stand. The jury listened to the 911 call made by Patrick Clancy. And then, one by one, the first responders who arrived at the house and found the 3 dead children in the basement took the stand. Let's go back and listen to some of the testimony that the jury was exposed to in those first crucial days of the Commonwealth's case.
These photos of Dawson's face, the petechial hemorrhaging on the face, appear to be darker than those and more expansive than those on Cora's face, correct?
They appear more prominent in Dawson than in Cora, yes.
And what can cause the damage being more prominent and more dispersed over the face?
Again, petechial hemorrhages occur as a result of rupturing of small vessels in the skin, and so the fact that there are more present in Dawson is indicative that there were moments where some blood did reach or push through the furrow or the ligature in little spikes or peaks, which would just result in momentary increases in blood pressure that would result in more petechial hemorrhages.
And what would cause that blood being able to flow?
Any movement against the carotid arteries. The carotid arteries are thicker and more muscular than the veins, so they're more likely to push through with the blood. So that could be movement of the ligature or movement of the person handling the ligature or movement of Dawson himself.
Some of the things we notice is sort of a blue tint to the skin, which typically, we can see when there's less oxygen or lack of oxygen. And then the other things on a quick survey is there was some areas of bruising on the neck and around the eyes called petechia, kind of little bleeding, episodes of bleeding under the skin, and I believe a small amount of blood coming from the nose.
Were you able to make observations of her hands or other parts of her body?
So the hands definitely had that, what we call cyanosis or blue hue.
You mentioned earlier that you did see some marks around his neck. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what were those consistent with?
Strangulation of some sort, most likely from an object, based upon the linear aspect of the bruising.
And when you say the linear aspect of the bruising, does that mean it's in a straight line?
Correct.
Allie Benevento and Randolph Rice still with us. The actual killing of the children. I mean, it's heartbreaking. The jurors were moved during those first days of trial because of the reality of it. A 4.5-week trial. When you add in voir dire, 5 weeks. Randolph, do you find that over the course of a trial that there is some desensitizing from the jury? It's human nature. They're exposed to such gruesome things day after day. By the end, when Attorney Sprague was really hammering on that in her close, thoughts of the effectiveness?
I didn't think that this was necessary to this trial as much. They needed to establish that the children were killed. We get that, and that's a horrible thing. And I do think that they become desensitized. But the point of that was it didn't move the needle, at least in my opinion, as to what her mental state was at the time of the crime. And really, to go to what I think that they should have hammered more of, and I think they did it in closing, and they certainly put this evidence in, was what was her behavior before? What were the things she was doing? And the problem that they had was, again, there wasn't that planning element of this. She was a loving mother. She cared about her kids. They were making snowmen. She took them to the doctor. Everybody in the family said she cared and took care of these kids and was a loving mother. That's their issue, is that they don't have that planning element, and that's what the jury's going to be hung up on, I think, is they've got to put themselves in that room or that moment and say, we don't have any evidence that shows that she didn't have psychosis.
Allie?
The problem the prosecution has had from the beginning is their version of events makes no sense. They have no burden to prove their motive, but jurors want to make sense of something. This is nonsensical, and in a way, Kevin Reddington's defense of this was a woman in the throes of psychosis, at least, even if we cannot understand it or we have not ourselves experienced it, puts this nonsensical, horrific act in some sort of context. The prosecution did not have that. They changed their story from the opening to the closing because they had to, because it never made sense, and it still doesn't. And so I think their decision to lean in on some of the gruesome details, it's possible that that may appeal to the jurors' emotions. How could it not? But it's also possible that that approach could backfire because it can come across as cruel and gratuitous. But I think that they did that because they know that they could not provide this jury with an explanation that makes any kind of sense whatsoever.
Okay, we are just getting word that Kevin Reddington has confirmed the question from the jury, and the jury wanted to see two separate pill bottles, Tiffany Smith, two bags, and then also the knife. They wanted to see those items. And the judge said it was not available. And the judge, along with the attorneys, returned a note saying that that was not going to happen, that they did not send those back to the jury room. Okay, just a minute here before we have to hit a break. Randolph, reaction to that?
That's odd. Why not send back the pill bottle? I get the knife. That could obviously,
no, that's okay.
I mean, maybe there's some safety concerns, but why not send back the pill bottle, at least the evidence bag with the pill bottle in it? That was a head scratcher for me. But the knife, though, that could be good for both defense and prosecution, because the defense is thinking, okay, they want to see how serious this knife was, how sharp it was. Could it really have cut her throat and her neck?
Okay. Allie Benevento, Randolph Rice, thank you as always for your valuable time. We appreciate it. We're going to slip in a commercial break. Our continuing coverage continues after this break. Susan Hendricks is going to take over for a bit. 5 hours, 8 minutes and counting. Back with more right
And because no one could take care of her kids the way she wanted them to, she had to take them with her.
Where was the defendant seated when you left the house, or was she seated?
She was standing.
And what was her demeanor?
Normal.
At any point in time, did she tell you she was planning to kill herself?
No. Do you think possibly that she's over-medicated?
I was practicing independently with my full credentials for about a month.
Cora was into princesses. She just liked taking care of people.
I'm truly finding my 19-month-old to be the most difficult human I've ever encountered. How you would describe Callan? How would you describe him?
He was the happiest, sweetest, easiest baby.
How many women have you treated that were suffering from postpartum psychosis?
I don't think I have.
Welcome to Court TV Live. I'm Susan Hendricks, coming to you from Court TV studio in Atlanta, while Ted Rowlands is in Massachusetts for the Lindsay Clancy murder trial, which has wrapped up a 5-week trial. Thanks so much for being with us. We are officially in verdict watch in the accused killer mom trial of Lindsay Clancy. 5 hours and 14 minutes in. This Massachusetts jury, they have been deliberating. This is the first full day. They did partially yesterday, but we are watching, keeping an inside look. You're looking at a live shot from inside of the Plymouth County Superior Courthouse. As soon as we hear any movement, any word, we'll bring it right to you. Lindsay Clancy is facing murder charges for the deaths of her 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan in January of 2023. The former labor and delivery nurse used exercise bands to strangle each child in the family basement while her husband Patrick was out running errands. Lindsay's attorney, Kevin Reddington, said his client is nervous and scared as he left the courthouse yesterday. Take a look.
Would you wish you had a second chance to go back up there and rebut any of that?
No.
Have any confidence?
Never confident.
Kevin, did you get your money back from the prosecutors? The 75 cents?
That comes under, you don't talk about hallway conversations with other attorneys, so I don't disclose that.
What do you have to say about this jury? The judge complimented them.
They've been great. They've been amazing.
There's a podium here, Mr. Reddington.
I don't care. I don't do podiums.
Kevin does not do podiums, everyone.
What will it take for institutions to realize that maternal mental health is a priority and something that needs to be funded and something that needs to be consistently supported for moms around the globe?
Somebody like you to advocate for them.
Yes, thank
Lindsay
you.
Clancy was obviously emotional in court. How's she doing after closing arguments?
She's doing all right. She's nervous. She's scared.
What do you hope you left the jury with today? I mean,
Pardon me?
What do you hope, after hearing everything from you today, that they're left with? What's the message that they're left with?
I think that they have to weigh all of this evidence, and I believe that the government ultimately has not proven their case.
Any idea how long this jury is going to take, you think?
Absolutely not. I would have no way of knowing. A lot of evidence, a lot of time on the case, a lot of exhibits, and they've been very, very attentive and working hard. I don't know.
But Kevin, you were here Monday or no?
Don't know.
And any response to those critics who say your closing wasn't as great as it could have been?
What a punch.
Just being honest here, I don't know. Do you have any second thoughts about the closing, or you think you left it all on the table?
Put it this way. I have my fair amount of haters. I'm sure there's people that would like to comment on the fact that I'm arrogant and aggressive and a bully and all the rest of it. And so, did the best I could.
He is unflappable. That, of course, is the criminal defense attorney, Kevin Reddington. Getting a lot of attention. You see it outside of the courthouse, how much attention this trial is bringing as we are in verdict watch. Joining me to discuss the case, trial attorney Krista Ramey. Krista, good to see you.
Me too.
So this breaking news, we had a question about an hour ago from the jurors. Can you read into that? Kevin Reddington walked out of the courthouse, told a few of those outside of the courthouse what the question was, and it was about pill bottles and also a knife. What does that say to you?
Well,
one, I don't know. I don't know how to really zone in on that particular pieces of evidence as to whether it favors one side or the other. It tells me that they are looking at the evidence and they want to go through it. Now, the judge didn't send any of it back, not even the pill bottle. I get why they didn't send the knife back. They could have brought the knife back with a courtroom attendant or a bailiff that could have held the knife and shown the knife to the jury. So there is ways that the jury could have seen it. The jurors didn't get an opportunity to look at some of this evidence up close during trial. So while they're deliberating, it is the only opportunity they really get in order to do that. Now, I think that, you can look at the fact that they're asking for, specific evidence that was used for her suicide attempt to be pretty important. Whether or not that swings one way or the other, I don't know. My view is it probably doesn't. It probably says to me that there are jurors that do not have their mind made up yet and want to take a look at, the implements that she used to try to kill herself to judge whether or not it was a serious attempt. That's my best guess at looking at the tea leaves here.
Yeah, Krista, a big part of the case, as you mentioned, and during closing arguments and throughout the trial, we heard from Kevin Reddington saying, look, she was a normal mom. She did nothing wrong, essentially saying she had no problems until she met a doctor who prescribed all of these pills. She wasn't reacting to them, holding up the bag during closing arguments. So to me, it may say, okay, right, how seriously was she taking? Did she want to no longer be here anymore? Did that drive her to where she was at the time that her 3 children were killed? So does that say to you, will this be difficult? It appears difficult to me, a difficult job the jurors have. They always do. But in this case, there's so much to analyze and go through.
Well, and you're right. And if you notice, at the beginning of the trial, the prosecution had a little bit of a different theory than they did in their closing arguments. So at the beginning of the trial, it was that this is not a serious suicide attempt. This was a cold, calculated woman that controlled every aspect of her life, etc. And then at closing, you had a much softer, more empathetic view of Lindsay, where it was that she didn't want to live anymore, and so she needed to take her children with her because no one could care for them the way that she did. So you have kind of 2 different, theories or approaches to that. So, I think that kind of can get the prosecution in trouble a little bit, because beyond a reasonable doubt, if the prosecution is kind of questioning how she got there, even though they don't have to prove motive, the jury just kind of wants to know the why, particularly with something so horrible like the death of these 3 children and the way in which they were killed.
Is that common, Krista, to shift kind of where you're going based on the attention that the case gets, how you're feeling the jury is responding to you?
Absolutely. I think that oftentimes during trial, I do civil work where, most of my cases involve sex abuse claims. And so at the beginning of the trial, some attorneys might approach telling the jury how much money they're going to ask at the end of the day. I don't want to do that. I don't want to tell every detail about every piece of evidence in my opening statements, because I don't want the jury to be looking for that. And then if I do change my mind or evidence doesn't come in because a judge makes an adverse ruling to me, or I look at the evidence coming in and I think, well, what I told the jury at the beginning of the trial is wrong, I need to be asking for this amount instead, whether it's higher or lower. That causes me to lose credibility. And since I'm the one that is giving out the information to the jury, I have to be credible. My client has to be credible too, but I have to also be credible. So you have to be careful when you change course, but you do oftentimes, have ideas about how things are going to come in, and then they don't. The judge can, pull the carpet right from underneath you, and you're looking at a completely different case than when you came into the case. I think that these prosecutors read the room. They probably, watched some, legal analysts on court TV, picking apart things, and they took a different approach at the time, it came to closing arguments. I think it was smart in their case because it made them more empathetic to the victims and more empathetic to Lindsay as well.
Yeah, and I think in the opening statement, it was she wanted out of motherhood, but we saw testimony after testimony of everyone saying she was a great mom. As we wait, Krista, 5 hours, 23 minutes and counting, we're going to go to movement, any movement outside of the courtroom, and bring you in the courtroom. Meanwhile, some of the most important testimony in this case were the witnesses, including Patrick Clancy, the husband.
Good morning, sir. Can you stop right there? Raise your right hand to the clerk, please.
Good morning. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony in the evidence you shall give to the court and the jury, in the matter now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant about shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may have a seat.
All right. Good morning, sir. I'm going to ask you to speak into that microphone. You can be seated if you'd like, if you're more comfortable. Okay. All right. Come up, please.
Your Honor. Good morning. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yeah, my name's Patrick Clancy. It's Patrickclancy.
And what is your date of birth?
June 15th, 1988.
What city do you live in now?
New York.
And what do you do for a living?
I work in tech.
How long have you worked in tech?
14 years.
And were you previously married to a person named Lindsay Clancy?
Yes.
And you're divorced now, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you see that person in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Could you point to them and describe something they're wearing?
It's not necessary.
She's wearing a pink shirt.
Record will reflect the identification of the defendant.
Thank you. Where did you meet the defendant?
In South Boston.
And when was that?
I think it was May 2013.
And how did you meet her?
Through my cousin.
And would it be accurate to state that your cousin had been college roommates of the defendant?
Yes.
And at some point in time, did you start dating?
Yes.
And around what time was that?
July 2013.
Did you eventually move in together?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
September 2015.
And where did you live?
In Quincy.
How long did you live in Quincy?
1 year.
And where did you go after that?
We bought a house in Weymouth.
And how long did you live in Weymouth?
2 years.
Did you eventually get married?
Yes.
And when was that?
December 2016.
And was that while you were living in Weymouth?
Yes.
Did you have your first child when you were living in Weymouth?
Yes.
And what was her name?
Cora.
And what was her date of birth?
December 24th, 2017.
Prior to getting married, did the defendant ever tell you she had taken psychiatric medication while in nursing school?
Not that I recall.
After having Cora, did the three of you move somewhere else?
Yeah, we moved to Duxbury.
And what was your address in Duxbury?
47 Summer Street.
And do you recall when you moved there?
I believe it was July 2018.
And where were you working at that time?
I was working for a startup called Automation Anywhere.
At some point in time, did you start working for Microsoft?
Yes.
And when was that?
May 2020.
And when you worked for Microsoft, did you go to an office or did you work from home?
I worked from home.
And was that from 2020 onward that you worked from home?
No, I started working from home in 2018.
2018, okay. So from 2018 up until, let's say, 2023, you were working from home, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you have an office in your home which you worked out of?
Eventually, yeah.
And where was that located?
In the basement.
And was that a finished basement?
Yes.
Going back to after Cora was born, do you recall the defendant having any physical issues after the birth?
Yeah.
And what were those?
I think there was a lot of tearing, and she bled a lot.
Did it take her a while to recover physically?
I would say so, yeah.
Did she have maternity leave at that time?
Yes.
Where was she working?
Mass General Hospital.
And what was she doing there?
She's a labor and delivery nurse.
At that point in time, when she had Cora in 2017, how long had she been a nurse?
3 years, maybe.
And do you recall how long her maternity leave was with Cora?
That was the shortest of the 3. I want to say it was 10 or 11 weeks.
And did you have paternity leave at that time?
Yeah, I had 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay. When you went back after the 2 weeks, back to work in the home, were there any issues that you noticed the defendant having?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to correct an earlier statement. I was working for Pegasystems when Cora was born.
Okay. And then eventually you worked for Microsoft?
Yeah.
Okay. And so after the 2 weeks of your paternity leave, the defendant was still on maternity leave, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did she have to take any psychiatric medications at that time?
Not that I know of. She had a lot of anxiety, but
Okay, so you're saying that she had some anxiety at that time, is that correct?
yeah.
How did that manifest, or how did you know that?
She just really struggled with the date of going back to work.
That, of course, was Patrick Clancy during the 5-week trial on the stand during his now ex-wife's murder trial. Did his testimony help the defense? And will the jury be discussing that testimony as we speak? They are 5 hours, 30 minutes in. We're going to take a quick break. We'll bring you every development from inside the courtroom and outside.
Rollins outside the courthouse in Plymouth, Massachusetts, covering the accused killer mom trial for Lindsay Clancy. We have you covered inside and outside this courthouse. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
And I'm Susan Hendricks in the Court TV studios in Atlanta as we wait for the jury to come to a decision. What will they decide? They are day 2, 5 hours and 34 minutes in. As soon as we hear any information, we're going to bring it to you. You won't miss a moment. Meanwhile, it's been a long trial. That's a live look inside the courtroom. 5 weeks. And some key testimony here that I believe the jurors are going through as we speak. A huge witness was Lindsay's husband. Let's go back to his testimony.
Immediately after having Cora, as she healed physically, what was her mood like when you're both on leave?
It was great. It was good.
Good, okay.
I mean, relatively, yeah.
And so did the anxiety start as it became closer in time to when she had to go back to work?
Yes.
How many shifts was she working at that time?
Before Cora was born, she was working at least 40 hours, maybe more. After she went back to work, it was, I think, initially just one.
One shift?
Yeah.
And was that a 12-hour shift?
It was per diem.
Per diem.
And then she eventually did 2 shifts. Okay. I think it was 20 weeks.
After 20 weeks, she moved to 2 shifts?
I'm sorry, it was 20 hours a week.
20 hours a week, okay. And so from the time she worked her way back up to 20 hours a week at work until she had your next child, did it remain that 20 hours per week that she worked?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And did you have any assistance in the home during that time after she went back to work? A nanny or a babysitter?
Yeah, we had babysitters. We had a babysitter who came probably 12 hours a week.
And did that typically happen after your wife had a shift, that the nanny or the babysitter would be there?
Yeah, so she could sleep.
Okay. Did the defendant work overnights?
Yeah.
And how long did you have that nanny or babysitter for?
Several years.
Do you remember her name?
We called her Miss Jen.
Miss Jen? Do you remember her last name?
Shanahan.
And then you had a second child, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was their name?
Dawson.
And what was Dawson's date of birth?
September 30th, 18.
And was Miss Jen still helping out in the home at that time?
Yeah.
And what was Dawson's delivery like?
Pretty traumatic.
How so?
He was in I think a breech position. So he came out in I guess I don't know much about it, but not an ideal way, and it caused just significant bruising and tearing.
So again, did the defendant with this second pregnancy have some pain and difficulty physically healing from the birth?
Yeah, much more so than Cora.
Okay. And was she on maternity leave at that time?
Yes.
How many weeks leave did she have at that time?
I don't recall, but I think it was more than the traditional 12. I want to say it was 13 or 14, maybe more.
Page 13, if I may approach.
You may.
You don't have to keep telling me the pages, that's okay.
Okay. I could have you look at page 13 and just read to yourselves lines 6 through 10, and then just look up when you're finished. Thank you. Does that refresh your memory as to how much maternity leave the defendant had after Dawson's birth?
Yeah.
And what was it?
18.
18 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And After dealing with the physical pain of birth and starting to heal, how was her demeanor and experience during that maternity leave?
I think it was fine at first. It was always when she had to go back to work, that's when she struggled. So.
Okay. So that was a pattern that you saw after
Yeah.
the baby, maternity leave was good, and then she'd struggle going back to work?
She just had a really hard time being separated from them.
What was the plan for how many shifts she would work or how many hours she would work after Dawson was born?
I believe it was the same thing.
And in terms of Ms. Shanahan, the babysitter, you had mentioned before that she was there about 12 hours a week. Did that stay consistent after Dawson's birth, or was it more or less?
Probably consistent.
After Dawson's birth, did the defendant ever tell you whether she was on any psychiatric medication after Dawson's birth?
No.
Did she seek treatment or tell you she sought treatment after Dawson's birth?
Yeah, she got a therapist for a short period of time, but it didn't last very long.
Did she tell you that at the time or later?
At the time.
Okay. And did she have any psychiatric hospitalizations or commitments at that time?
No.
What about after Cora's birth? Any psychiatric hospitalizations or treatments?
No.
Was there a time after Dawson's birth where she wanted to declutter your garage?
Maybe at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you assist her with that?
Yeah.
And how was that done?
We had a lot of stuff to throw away, and I think we sold some stuff on Facebook Marketplace. We just had a lot of stuff.
So did the two of you go through the items in the garage and organize it into what you would keep, what you would throw away, and what you would sell?
Yes.
Okay. And so it was very organized?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. And you finished the project, is that correct?
It was always ongoing.
As the jury deliberates 5 hours and 42 minutes in, we're taking you back. Key testimony here. This is from the now ex-husband of Lindsay on the stand, Patrick, talking about what he noticed after the birth of each child. Right now, they're talking about cleaning out the garage. What will that lead to? Was it mania? Were there signs? He also discusses firing the nanny. Don't go anywhere. More after the break. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Susan Hendricks. As we wait for a verdict, we are 5 hours, 46 minutes in. It is 9 women, 3 men who are deciding the fate of Lindsay Clancy. That's a live look inside the courtroom. As soon as we hear any word, we'll bring you there. You won't miss a thing. Ted Rowland's, of course, outside of the courthouse waiting to hear. This has been a long trial, more than 5 weeks, a lot to go through for those jurors, and the testimony, especially Patrick Clancy. He's talking about his wife during the time that she had her 3 children. Let's listen to his testimony and see how relevant it is to their decision. His decisions, will that play in to what they decide?
Now, eventually you had your 3rd child, correct?
Yeah.
And what was their name?
Callan.
And what was his date of birth?
May 26th, 2022.
Can you describe that delivery for us?
It was great. From what I could tell, it was relatively quick. It was during the day. We were both smiling after, and I don't think there was as much physical trauma.
Nothing compared to what happened with Cora or Dawson, is that correct?
Correct.
Did the defendant have maternity leave after Callan's birth?
Yeah.
And how long was that leave?
She never went back.
How long was it planned for initially?
I want to say 18 weeks.
Okay. And were you on paternity leave as well?
Yes.
And how long was your paternity leave?
12 weeks.
So with Callan being born on May 26, 2022, the 2 of you were home with the children that summer on leave, is that correct?
Yeah.
What was family life like during that time period, those summer months?
It was great. We had a lot of time off. I was able to spend a lot of time with, I spent a lot of time with Cora and Dawson. So I would take them around, the playgrounds and birthday parties and stuff like that.
Okay. And what would Lindsay be doing while you were with Cora and Dawson?
Sometimes she would come with us with Callan, but oftentimes we did kind of like a divide and conquer. So she'd be home with Callan and I'd be out with the older kids.
And what types of family activities did you all do during those summer months?
We went on a couple vacations. We went to the beach. We went out on our boat and went to friends' houses.
During those months, when you're going to the beach and out on the boat and visiting with friends, were there any signs of anxiety in the defendant during those months?
I would say starting in September, yes, but in the previous months, not so much.
When had she been scheduled to go back to work?
I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was October.
Okay. So again, it was that pattern of as it became closer in time to go back to work,
yeah,
she started to struggle?
Yeah.
During the times when she would get anxious, when it was time to go back to work and she would start being anxious, did you ever have any difficulty understanding her when she spoke?
No.
And did she ever exhibit any behavior that made you concerned enough to call a doctor or want to commit her?
No.
When she was showing this anxiety, what were you seeing in her behavior?
Just a lot of stress. There were days where she had all 3 kids, and there's different nap schedules and different needs. So it was just really stressful.
Okay. And you're still working in the basement office at this point after Callan's born, correct?
I went back to work late August.
Okay. And when you work downstairs, how often would you come upstairs during the day?
All the time, for lunch or just to say hi.
Were there times when Lindsay would ask you to hold the baby in the office while she was doing something.
So, yeah.
Okay. And were there times when you would watch one or more of the children while she took another to a doctor's appointment or to an errand or something like that?
Yeah, if it worked out with the schedule, yeah.
Okay. What was the plan in terms of how many shifts or hours she was going to work after Callan?
I believe the plan was 2 shifts per week, but there was a lot of flexibility. She could have done really anything.
Do you recall saying previously that you were going to start off with 1 shift and hopefully move to 2?
I could imagine, yeah.
Okay. And you said there were some options, correct? What were those options if that didn't work out?
Well, I always put money aside in basically our own maternity account, just so that if she needed more flexibility, we planned for that. So
if she needed more time off, more than what her work would provide for her, you were financially secure enough to afford that at that time?
I want to bring back in trial attorney Krista Ramey to get her take on the now ex-husband, Patrick Clancy, and his testimony. How pertinent is this to the case, to the prosecution and to the defense?
I think his testimony cuts both ways. It really, really does. I think that he has provided the prosecution with some very good testimony in terms of how she was, in the months leading up to the suicide attempt and the killing of his children. So he talks about how, she was, calm and she doesn't want to go back to work and she has anxiety, all of these things, right, that we've been talking about. But that also cuts the other way. And so when he talks about those things, on cross-examination, we're hearing more, about how prolific this was in her life, that she couldn't go back to work. She didn't want to leave her children. There was that's kind of almost manic, which feeds into the bipolar diagnosis, okay? The, keeping of all of the detailed instructions for people that are watching the children, that kind of fits in with manic. And so his testimony does cut both ways. And it also became apparent that at the end of the case that Reddington finally kind of maybe was listening to some of the conspiracy theories out there, but he really questioned the veracity of some of the things that Patrick said in terms of could he actually, does Lindsay actually say to him, I tried to kill myself and the kids are in the basement? Mm-hmm. I think that we all kind of thought, how is this possible? I guess with this thoracic spinal cord injury, you probably don't have that serious of injuries to your throat. Maybe you can talk, but there was, evidence of injuries to her throat as well from the, cutting. And, so I think that it all became very clear that, his testimony could also play into not just a not guilty by reason of insanity or lack of criminal responsibility, but maybe also a not guilty verdict, a straight up not guilty verdict that the prosecution has not proven their case. Not that she's not guilty in terms of they didn't think that she did it, but has the prosecution proved each element of first degree, second degree, or manslaughter?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I thought that was masterful on the side of the defense, what we saw with Kevin Reddington, because he didn't necessarily have to say anything. He just kind of stood back and said, wait a minute. Why, and this was a line, he said that, why would she do it now when she has a couple hours when you're out running errands? Why not when you're out with the guys, throwing in a ski trip, planting seeds of reasonable doubt? And you're absolutely right in terms of speaking. Could she speak? Because all of the first responders said no. They heard grunts and groans, but he was able to do that. And in his opening statement, he spoke fondly of him, saying, Patrick does not have to be here. He is. You'll hear about what a great mother she is. And then he, out of the gate, he kind of turns on him and puts him on the defense of like, wait a minute, how could you talk to her? And the timeline into question. So I thought that was reasonable doubt as well without actually saying it, right?
Absolutely. And you don't have to, feed into the conspiracy theories. I think that, we've seen, in Massachusetts itself, we've seen, defense attorneys lean into conspiracy theories and, with moderate success in the Karen Reed trial. But I don't know that, as a serious defense on a case like this, that leaning into a conspiracy theory that it was the husband that did it is really the way to go.
Right.
But I think that you call into question, what, where, like you said, there was all these other opportunities for him, to be gone for a long period of time, for him to do this if it was something that she was thinking about and planning.
Yeah.
And that is why I think that a lot of us feel like that the psychosis is so believable, that she became a puppet at that moment, just following the instructions of the voices that she was hearing, and make it so compelling, because why would she pick a time when she barely had any time at all?
Yeah. And he makes you think about all of that without actually saying what no one really wants to say, just planting seeds of doubt. I'm going to take a quick break. Absolutely, Krista. We are 5 hours, 57 minutes in. We are on Jury Watch. We'll bring you any developments as they come in. Stay with us.
Did Lindsay speak when she was outside on the ground? Because it was confusing that the psychiatrist said that Patrick said she did.
I wouldn't believe him if he said in the middle of a blizzard that it was snowing out, okay? So I don't care what the psychiatrist said. You heard that, well, no, you didn't, unfortunately. If you were in the courtroom, you would have heard the tape. She was unable to speak. She just moaned and made grunting noises, that's all.
So why would Patrick say that?
How do I know?
Defense attorney Kevin Reddington doubling down there, talking about Patrick Clancy, the witness on the stand, the now ex-husband of his client. He's saying, I wouldn't believe him. And the cross-examination there was masterful. So he also testified in terms of what he saw at home, how Lindsay acted throughout the years when having her first, second, and third child. We're on verdict watch, 6 hours, 2 minutes in. We'll bring you back when we hear anything or see anything. We're live inside of the courtroom there in that picture. Ted Rollins, of course, is outside of the courthouse there in Massachusetts. Meanwhile, I want to take you back to the testimony of Patrick Clancy. Take a look.
During this time, in the fall of 2022, were Cora and Dawson attending preschool?
Yes.
And where was that?
Learning Sprouts.
And where is Learning Sprouts located?
Duxbury.
How often were they attending Learning Sprouts?
Full days Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a half day on Thursday.
And what was a full day? What hours?
I think it was 9 to 4.
9 a.m. to 4 p.m.?
I think so, yeah.
And what was a half day?
Like 9 to 12:30. I think they might have had some days where they started early. I can't remember.
Okay. But basically all day, working hours all day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the mornings on Thursday, is that right?
Right.
And who would do drop-offs for school?
We both would.
And what about pickups?
Both of us.
Together or take turns?
Usually we would take turns.
Now, at some point in time after Callan was born, did you hire a nanny?
Yes.
And when was that?
I think it was in August or September.
Of 2022?
Yeah.
And who was that nanny?
Lainey. I don't remember her last name.
Does Elaine Rossi sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you recall how many days per week Elaine was going to work when you hired her?
I think it was 12 hours.
But it wouldn't be 12 hours altogether, it would be spread out over the week, is that right?
Correct.
And who was she hired to take care of?
Everyone, but mainly it was going to be Callan.
Because Cora and Dawson would be at school?
For the most part, yeah.
And what was the plan for when Elaine would work? Was it that same type of after Lindsay worked shifts or something different?
Yeah, the goal was after Lindsay would work. I mean, she never went back to work, but I think we wanted to get her just like oriented with our house and the kids. So we had her start before, and then she was amazing. She was an amazing caregiver, but eventually we decided to let her go because Lindsay was home anyways.
Okay. So when you initially hired her in August or September, you said Lindsay was going back to work in October. So is that what you're talking about, that give her that month or so, give Elaine that month or so to get situated and acclimated to the house?
Yeah.
Okay. Have the kids get used to her, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Did she also, Elaine, did she also do some cleaning, laundry, and food prep?
Yeah. Yeah, she was amazing.
Now, during this time frame, and again in the end of summer, fall period of 2022, what types of activities were Cora and Dawson doing?
Gymnastics. Are you talking about organized activities or just in general?
Organized.
I only remember gymnastics.
Did they both do the gymnastics?
Yeah.
And then were they also participating, maybe not in organized situations, but in swimming, soccer, skiing, things like that?
Yeah, they were doing swimming, and yeah, Cora and Dawson did skiing. Yeah, Cora started doing soccer. She didn't really like it, but did a little bit.
And who took them skiing?
I did.
And as in terms of the swimming, where would you do that?
We did it at Goldfish in Rockland, I think. And then Lindsay took them somewhere in, I think, Plymouth. I don't remember where it was.
So you would each take them swimming at various times?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you also do some swimming at the Kingsbury Club?
Yes.
And what is the Kingsbury Club?
It's like a gym with a pool, and they had childcare, so sometimes they would hang out in the kids' room and we would go work out.
And is that in Duxbury?
It's on the Kingston-Duxbury line. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah.
Okay. And so you could drop the kids off at the daycare portion and go work out or swim or something like that?
Yeah, or we could go with them and go swimming.
Okay. Did Lindsay work out?
Yes.
She was very health conscious?
I think so.
And were you aware that she had been an athlete in both high school and college?
Yes.
Do you recall what she did?
Competitive cheerleading.
Now, when you were together, what type of exercise would she do or did she prefer?
She did a lot of running. She did the Peloton, and she did, there's like some program called Beachbody, I think.
Do you recall when she started Beachbody?
Maybe in the spring of 2022. I'm not sure.
So right before having Callan, would that be accurate?
Probably, yeah.
Key testimony of Patrick Clancy during that 5-week trial. Right now, we are on verdict to watch, 6 hours, 8 minutes in. It continues in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. Ted Rowlands is taking over next live from outside the courthouse. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Court TV Live and the Court TV YouTube channel and the Law and Crime Trials YouTube channel. I'm Ted Rollins, and this is rolling coverage. It is Verdict Watch. In the case against Lindsay Clancy, we are in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and the jury has now been out over 6 hours, 6 hours and 13 minutes and counting. There's only been one question. There's a live look inside the courtroom. Our camera ready to go is if and when Judge Sullivan takes the bench in the next few hours. We got you covered if there's a question, or of course if there's a verdict. There was one question so far. The jury did come in at 9 o'clock, brought into the courtroom. They went back to work instantaneously after saying they hadn't read or seen anything about the case. And then they had a question, and it was according to Kevin Reddington outside the courthouse. We don't have the exact verbiage, but they wanted to, the jury, see the knife and the bags of pill bottles, which were used in the closing arguments both by Reddington and the Commonwealth. What does it mean? Well, we don't know exactly the question, and we don't know the answer. That was not put on the record, and we're not sure if those items went back to the jury room. Obviously, the knife didn't, but did those pill bottles? Rick Grundy is with us. He is very familiar with New England, and specifically this area, as he was the lead prosecutor for how many years?
I was a prosecutor for about 25 years.
25 years. The guy was, yes, he's an OG here in terms of the Commonwealth. And Krista Ramey is also with us. She is in Los Angeles. Cody Thomas is in the Court TV studios. And we are going to spend the next however many hours together as we wait for any word from this jury that's hard at work. You know, is there a Friday verdict? Some of the jurors apparently were cleaned up a little. The guy that wears a T-shirt was wearing a collared shirt. A lot of reading the tea leaves, and then this question. Rick, the question has left us with more questions than any real answers. What do you opine by the knife and the pill bottles wanting more?
That's a tough question. Unfortunately, I'm a little bereft of information, because what I see there is that these were items that were actually seized by Attorney Reddington after the fact. They were not seized by the Commonwealth, placed into evidence bags, locked into evidence, developing that chain of custody that follows through to the actual presentation in court. So there could be an objection to them being entered into evidence because they were not done in that formal manner. I don't know if that happened or not, but the easy answer would be that because of that, they've been marked for identification, but not entered as evidence, and therefore could not go to the jury.
And wouldn't they be back in the evidence room, in the deliberation room anyway? They wouldn't have to ask for them if they were.
In the normal course of deliberation, yes, they get all the evidence. However, that does not include weapons.
Yeah, right, yes.
That does not include bullets. And if there's actual drugs in here, in these bottles, that could be the same rationale.
Oh, that's a great point. That is a great point. So maybe they, and Krista Ramey, they did, the Commonwealth pointed out after Kevin Reddington used it as a prop, saying this, once she got these pills, her life went downhill. Then the Commonwealth got up and Attorney Sprague said, well, look at those pills, because they should have more pills in, or they have more pills in them than they should. She wasn't taking them as instructed. What do you take on the ask from the jury here?
You know, it's interesting because the same evidence has masterfully been used by both sides here in ways, you know, that are, you know, opposite basically. So that, you know, she is overprescribed. She's given all of this medication, but she is not taking all of this medication. So is she compliant? You know, when you get a new prescription, you're not necessarily, you know, then, you know, taking that in conjunction with the other, you probably are stopping one and starting another. And so I think, you know, wanting to see the pills, I mean, I kind of get it. I didn't think about the pills actually being in there, in the bottles still. And so that is probably why they won't let them back. But I do think that they could have allowed them back with a bailiff, so the jury could look at them, you know, and see what how much medication was left in each bottle. I think that there was a way to show the jurors that evidence, because it is evidence that was definitely important during the course of this trial and used by both sides very effectively.
Cody Thomas is monitoring the YouTube feeds that we have going out, and we've got some people watching along with us, a lot of people actually, and we're glad to have you along with us because frankly we're going to get word before anybody else. It's our camera in the courtroom, it's our Rich, the photographer, who's on speed dial from the Commonwealth, and once there is a question or a verdict, you'll find out first right here. Cody, any chatter about the question, people opining one way or another?
Yeah, Ted, they're just putting their statements out. You know, why would it be important to see the pill bottle? Why would it be important to see the knife? Things like that, and everything else they want to say about it, Ted. But one thing I'm looking at here, we had 2 polls up. The first poll, Ted, had 53,000 votes, and the prompt was, will Lindsay Clancy be found, you know, X, Y, and Z? 68% of people say not guilty on this poll, Ted. 14% say guilty of first-degree murder, 12% guilty of second-degree murder, 6% of manslaughter. And Ted, just 4 minutes ago, we have a new poll up. What would your verdict be? So this is just the minds of the people and what they imagine this is going to turn out to be. 4 minutes ago, we already have going on 4,500 votes. 77% of people say not criminally responsible. 14% first-degree murder, 3% second-degree murder, 6% manslaughter. But overwhelmingly, Ted, between both of those polls, one at 53,000, this new one just came up 4 minutes ago, going on 5,000 votes and counting as I'm looking at it, as we're talking. Overwhelmingly, people say not guilty or not criminally responsible here. But another question I'm monitoring in the chat right now, people being curious, if this is a case, the result is where she's found not criminally responsible and she's committed to a mental health facility and things like that, they're asking what are her chances of her coming out of that mental facility at some point down the line. Is there a chance that she'll ever go home, back out into the public? Of course, the whole idea is when she goes to that facility is that they'll evaluate her over the years. It's not going to be a quick thing. It's not going to be 6 to 8 months, but they're evaluating whether, you know, she'll be a threat to herself, threat to the community, threat to people around her, and things of that nature. But you know, there's been talk about how sometimes people stay in those facilities longer than their expected sentence would have been if they were found guilty. So that's just something they're curious about as far as, you know, asking questions in the chat. But still, again, Ted, overwhelmingly people think this is going to be a not guilty or, you know, a result of her not being found criminally responsible.
Rick Grundy, what does happen if the jury comes back and says not criminally responsible?
So exactly as Cody pointed out, she would be committed to a state hospital. She would likely go to the secure Bridgewater State Hospital, which is a prison of sorts in that you are confined there.
Where is that? What
in
city?
Bridgewater, Massachusetts.
Oh, fair.
And,
good name.
I could then see Attorney Reddington attempting to get her to another secure facility, perhaps a private secure facility, which would be unlikely if she's still under this question of criminal responsibility, or that she was not criminally responsible because of her mental care. But normally what happens is these people who are found not guilty by reason of criminal responsibility, they're still arguing and found to be in the medical defect mental health-wise. Here, Attorney Reddington took a tact and kind of had to, that she was in a psychosis but came out of it, and medical changes, she's fine, she's okay, she's out of it. So she would be in a different position than most of them to say, maybe after even a couple of years, you know, look, I've been fine since 2023. It was a matter of dealing with this medically, and we've done that effectively.
And if the postpartum element had anything to do with it, all the research says it's a finite reaction. The postpartum window, if you will, extends maybe a year, a little longer at max.
Right.
Krista Ramey, thoughts on that part of the equation where somebody is interested, because that is part of To what extent will jurors know that? I mean, if they have there's an instruction, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, that does say if she is found not criminally responsible, it does not mean she goes free.
Correct.
But they don't have the whole story. How does that, you think, factor in if I'm a juror and there's 3 dead kids here? I'm real reluctant to let this woman just not pay if they think that that's the result.
Well, and that's always a real concern. You know, jurors always are asking themselves questions that are not appropriate for them to ask themselves while they're deliberating, and they're discussing it among the jurors as well. And, you know, they also do things that they're probably not permitted to do, like look things up online. So, you know, I'm not a firm believer in jurors always do the right thing in terms of those things, but there's also people that just have specific knowledge about the criminal justice system that they might, you know, kind of know this anyway, that they'll be, you know, committed. You also have like really notorious cases out there, like, you know, Hinckley, for instance, who didn't get released until, I don't know, like a couple years ago. So you do have a lot of common knowledge information out there that would maybe put some of these reluctant jurors at ease. But with Lindsay, because they are not saying that she's still in the throes of psychosis, which is what caused her to commit these crimes, then, you know, there is the real possibility that she might not be confined for very long at all, maybe 60 to 90 days up to a year. The DA has a right to come in and every time that she's up to petition to keep her in. I think others do as well. So, you know, there's ways that you can keep the system in check, but I don't know that the jurors actually know all of this, but they're definitely talking about it.
One of the drumbeats for this scenario is the victim family members. There is no victim family member that's come out against Lindsay Clancy. It muddies the water a little bit on a potential release if, and it's a huge if, she's found not guilty or not responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is unusual that there isn't some source, even if it's tertiary to the actual people involved, that take the position of victim, whether it's in-laws or whatnot, which we have not seen in this case. I still think, just following up on what was said, that there is, and we've seen a real monumental shift, I think, in people's opinion of this as a defense with respect to this particular case. But I think going into it, there was still that bias that, look, either it's a sham defense, or if there is something to it, the concern is, I've got 3 dead children here, and she's going to be out on the streets in a year or 2.
Right, which actually might be true. Cody, it's very rare, cases we cover, that there isn't a group of people behind the prosecution in the courtroom every day, the grieving parents, the sisters, the brothers. That is a huge component because the jurors are seeing them day in and day out. They know that the pain caused by the person at that defense table is real. Here, it's sort of the opposite. Nobody was behind the prosecution. The courtroom was packed behind Lindsay Clancy, and relatives, all of them that testified, supported her.
That's the thing, Ted. To your point that you were just making, it muddies the water a little bit because throughout this entire case, as I've covered over the last 5 weeks, I've been trying to put myself in the jury psychology, looking at both sides, how they could analyze this, how they could analyze that. And I just keep coming back to Patrick Clancy, the man who was in the house every day, the father of these kids, the man that came home and found these kids strangled to death and his wife jumped out of a second-story window paralyzed in the yard. He is testifying, you know, it pretty much in favor of her. You know, this is the woman that killed your kids and you're still not really, he had every opportunity to point the finger and be like, you know, get her. And he did not. Okay, you had Lindsay's mother and, you know, her sisters and co-workers, which there's a potential there for people to look at that as, you know, of course, this is her mom and her sister and everything. They're going to, you know, be in favor of her just, you know, off the natural progression of things. They want to be in support. But then you have Patrick Clancy's mother, Sue Clancy, who was also testifying on Lindsay's behalf in support of her. So, like, when you come back to this handful of people, and as you were pointing out, Ted, no one really going against her saying, get this woman, she murdered these kids, blah, 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 outside of the prosecutors themselves, I think that's really going to be something that the jury is wrestling with here.
And Krista, impressing your mother-in-law is a very difficult thing, let alone after you've killed her 3 grandkids. The idea that Sue Clancy got up there and supported Lindsay sort of blew back on the Commonwealth, you could argue, because in the opening, Prosecutor Buckingham was attacking her, saying that person over there, she may look harmless. She was a conniving individual that was controlling and manipulative, with some grit. Her attitude was, biting. Now, fast forward to the close, night and day. Sprague knew better to do that because, frankly, the Commonwealth didn't deliver on that characterization of Lindsay Clancy. How does that play for the jury?
They didn't deliver at all on that, and I think that is the reason for the shift, which I think can be problematic for the prosecution. They promised this jury one thing, and they didn't get it, and that may feed right into reasonable doubt, right? But what you also have with to your point about her mother-in-law, her mother-in-law was testifying that she was almost desperate to find help, desperate to get better. She was talking to her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law was giving her advice. She was also a nurse. And then the prosecution came in on an attack mode in cross-examination with this woman, and it was just uncomfortable to watch because she is a victim here. Her grandchildren were killed, and you could see the incredible pain that she had when talking about that at the beginning of her direct. And then for the prosecution to attack a victim on the stand, I just have never seen anything like that before in terms of trying to win a case maybe at all costs, but there was a way to cross-examine her. This was not the way.
Yeah. Oh, and that was the mortal sin question from Prosecutor Buckingham, which, of course, erupted in that sidebar, which Judge Sullivan called for him, and he was visibly upset after that. Was that the biggest misstep of the trial from either side?
No.
What was
the biggest misstep was stepping into the pulpit not really knowing your case. I mean, now that might be somewhat of an overcharge, but their beginning stance was 360 to their closing stance. The use of the attempted suicide did a complete 360 on that. So I think those were the biggest missteps. And again, I think I said on an earlier day, what a prosecution has to do is know its case frontwards, backwards, and be confident enough into it to say, we had a bad day today. Bad days are going to happen in trials that go on for 4 and 5 weeks. We got through some rough stuff. We had some rough stuff to get through, but stay the plan.
But what was the plan?
She could not. No, in this situation, she could not stay the plan.
Yeah, because it was a miscalculation, or why did they not see the groundswell of support when they knew the interviews with the family members had a certain tenor to them, including Patrick?
I think the assumption there was that these are individuals who are so close to every element of this crime, grandkids first and foremost, children first and foremost, that to some degree, and knowing the defendant too, as the defense, and I think one of the hardest things the defense has is to show that she went from great mom to murderer, back to great mom. That's not the person they knew. And there's a part of it, I think, when you're that close, psychologically, it's far easier to accept as a break from reality than it is that this person who lived with my son for 14 years and had these 3 children is a knowing murderer.
Yeah, and there might be some also natural guilt within that circle because she did reach out for help, and likely others had the same attitude that frankly she had, that we can get through this to be strong. Lindsay's got this. She's always been strong. This happens, there's probably a seed of like, oh, I should have blank.
Yeah, there's been nobody here shy to jump on the medical providers. And I think that's something that one question may show that the jury has seized upon, because I think it was one of the more cogently previously not developed parts of the Commonwealth's case, and that is that she went to a bunch of physicians, but she didn't necessarily take their advice because she wanted to go for a run or because she wanted to be at a birthday party. I think that's really where they're dicing it, and maybe why they wanted to see those prescriptions here.
Yeah.
You know, in the Monday morning quarterback category, I think if I was a prosecutor, I would have wanted to get a pharmacologist on this. So instead of having the jury think there was just tons and tons of pills and they were getting tossed down the throat and it made her kill her 3 kids, have a pharmacologist say, this is what she was on from point A to point B. These are the effects of it. She went off it. She was cleared of that when she went on another. So they don't have the impression that she was on 15 different medications at one time that could have all these adverse reactions.
Right. And it turned out the defense had the expert in terms of pharmacology.
Right.
Let's get a break. 6 hours, 33 minutes, and counting. The jury hard at work in the building behind us here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Our rolling coverage continues right after this.
Coming soon to Court TV.
Wife and a darn good mother.
That's Kevin Reddington in his close talking about Lindsay Clancy and her character before she started that downward tumble, spin, out of control, starting months before she ended up killing her 3 children on January 24th, 2023. Another part of Kevin Reddington's closing argument that raised some eyebrows and definitely caught the attention of everybody in the courtroom was when he started pulling out quarters from his pocket and laying them down on the rail, equating it to basically a pool hall challenge to the Commonwealth. Take a listen.
We're just going to assassinate this young lady in every which way we can. Remember that evidence? I was concerned. She was drinking 5 drinks a day. She was worried about, you heard the evidence up to 2019. What are they talking about? She wasn't drinking while she had her kids. She wasn't drinking while she's breastfeeding. She would have a couple of beers with her friends. That's bad. Put that over in the bad pile. Right here. We spent all that time showing through Dr. Lapasada's testimony that this was a legitimate, dreadful, horrific suicide attempt. You think about this beautiful young girl throwing herself out a window. That's a quarter. I don't know if you ever played pool. I challenge you to tell this jury why we spent a week showing that she committed, your witnesses.
Counsel, address the jury.
Said, their witnesses, serious suicide attempt. Remember that? Tried to kill herself. So now they'll back off on that, and they'll agree. Serious suicide attempt. Watch the evidence. Watch the manipulation. Remember the argument with the bands. She took the bands out of the bag, put gloves on, talks to Dr. Lapasada on the Zoom, slams the bands down out of the paper bag, does the movement of the bands and yells at Lapasada and says, rat. They were just rat. They weren't knotted. Because you gotta get Lindsay tightening the band, right? You gotta hold it. You gotta hold it for a minute. You gotta hold it for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. That's why she needed the bands not knotted. And then she said, it's like this. And they sprang open. Remember that? Dr. Lapasada said, yeah, I saw what you did. And she walked away like if the glove won't fit moment. Quarter number 2. And it shows the manipulation. This government, this prosecution is a mess. They would take their evidence and argue to you that she did not tie a knot and walk away because, as Dr. Lapasada said, you're talking about 4 or 5 seconds, so somebody passes out. No, they got to have the 4 minutes, and that's not what the evidence shows, is it? And you've also got manipulation of Paul Zeisel told Lindsay what to say. Say that you're hearing voices. Think about how ugly that is, because you know beyond a reasonable doubt, even though we don't have any proof. You have no burden. You heard from Sheila. Remember Sheila, the woman that's the reverend or whatever, she's the chaplain at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. She didn't know Lindsay from anybody that night when she came in all broken up. And she told you that she continued. She was there when Lindsay came out of, was extubated. She was there when Lindsay was going through her treatments. She was there for 8 days before Paul Zeisel even knew Lindsay existed.
Rick Grundy, Krista Ramey, Cody Thomas with us as we wait for any word out of this deliberation room. 6 hours, 43 minutes and counting. Krista Ramey, the quarter shtick from Reddington in the close caught people's attention. Not quite sure, if it translated with I'm challenging you in a pool, a billiard, match, but your overall thoughts on it, and the fact that he left him there and Sprague grabbed him.
The leaving them there was the bad part. You take them with you, right? I think gimmicks can sometimes land and sometimes they don't. I think that this was actually kind of classic Reddington. It's kind of what we all have grown to love about him, is that he is unapologetically who he is. He is a little gruff and rough around the edges, and I can see that he is challenging them to answer these questions. Many of us do this where we, maybe write a question on a whiteboard or tell a question to the jury. I have some questions, for the other side, and I would like, maybe let's see if they answer them in, when they have their opportunity to come up here, because I will not have another shot at that. And so that's, how I do something like that, but that is all he was basically doing. He was challenging them to answer for what they did. And I think that can be very effective, because the dramatic, throwing down of the quarters it's waking the jury up, and the jury is paying attention, and what is he saying here, and why is this so important? And so I think that it's good. I think you should take the quarters up there.
Yeah. Cody, the quarter thing, we've been in courtrooms before, and defense attorneys do, well, both sides do things, but usually it's the defense attorney that kind of goes over the top. What was your take on the quarters from Reddington?
Well, the thing about it, Ted, people love a demonstrative aid, especially after 5 weeks of being inundated with all sorts of emotional testimony, psychiatric testimony, medical testimony that these regular old people on this jury might not understand when they're using all these big words and naming all these 13 different medications about what Lindsay Clancy was on. But once you have Kevin Reddington up there slamming down some quarters, like to Krista's point, you wake up. Wait, what's going on? What's going on right now? What's he doing? What are these quarters? What's happening? So, I think it could have been effective in the sense of getting the jury's attention. To your point, Ted, I don't know if it was as effective enough as to, translate into the challenging of the billiard game. That wasn't my immediate thought. And then I was like, oh, yeah, that is what people do when you go to a pool hall and do things like that. But the fact of, just waking people up to the seriousness of what he felt his closing argument was conveying, I think it was effective in that regard. And I'm monitoring the chat here, Ted. A lot of people have their mixed reviews on the effectiveness of the quarters. One chat here said he laid the quarters down for every lie that the prosecution told. So people feel strongly about what happened here. I think it was effective again in the fact of gathering attention.
Sorry about that.
He's likely done it before in a case over the years. Your thoughts, Rick?
I think those same quarters he's had for about 30 years now.
But why wouldn't he pick them up? Because Sprague, good on her. She took advantage of it, took one by one, put them into her pocket after she made a point.
But it's a lingering memory. I tried a case once where we had this one photograph that showed this blood on the defendant's cuffs of his jacket, which was pivotal based on the facts. And every chance that I got, and is this a picture of the defendant? And we had it on the screen there, and and I'd just leave it there and go on with my examination. Defense attorney would look up and say, could we take that picture down? So maybe he left it there so as she's doing her closing, they can still think back to that.
Yeah.
But I think we all have little things like that. You grab the jury's attention because he had the 3 points that he wanted to make sure they got those. You do something like that, you got to make sure that it hits. But on the defense side, it's also a way to physically demonstrate to them what they're going to hear. It's you. It's your burden to prove this. Mm-hmm. So that's the argument within that demonstration.
All right. 6 hours, 48 minutes and counting. We're not going anywhere. Hopefully you do not either. We're back with more of our continuing coverage, rolling coverage It's Verdict Watch in the case against Lindsay Clancy from Plymouth, Massachusetts. Back after this. Which we had earlier today, but otherwise the jury of 9 women and 3 men hard at work in the deliberation room. Gives us time to go back and think about the evidence, the crucial evidence that came, and also those closing arguments which both sides leaned into at the end of this case, the last word that the jurors got. The journal evidence was used by both Kevin Reddington and Attorney Sprague in the closing, starting with Reddington, but she picked up the journal herself and had an answer for it. Let's remind everybody what they said.
You look at her journals that she took, you'll see as you go along in the dates that she's recording in these journals, she's talking about the drugs that she was prescribed. And look at the first page. Look at how detailed. Dates, how she felt, 10 milligrams Prozac, and it goes on like that, goes on through November into December. December 9th, 10th, 11th. Horrible intrusive thoughts. Horrible thoughts in the AM. Horrible thoughts. Horrible thoughts. No motivation. And then finally, horrible thoughts, no motivation, deeply depressed. Then, that's around the time she went to Women and Infants Hospital, right? Looking for help. Look at this. As she runs into January, there's nothing other than little chicken scratches because her mind was gone. In January, as she's on these drugs and she's suffering from what you've heard is postpartum depression that can lead to postpartum psychosis, and you have these men coming in here that don't even know psychosis from schizophrenia as experts, telling you that if a woman doesn't have these symptoms, like it's a disease, symptoms of postpartum depression within 4 weeks, that's it. Lights out. You're not a person that can be considered.
And if you look at their journal, you look at this journal that defense counsel showed you, she's very detailed, excuse me, about when she took medication, what she took, the amounts she took, what the effect was for months, starting in October and going all the way up to January. And where it stops, January 18th. Someone who's been so meticulous about everything, all the way up to January 18th, and it just stops. And it's as if she's decided she's done trying. She's decided that it's too much, and she doesn't want to do it anymore. And so she just stops keeping track.
Krista Ramey, Rick Grundy, Cody Thomas, all with us here. The journal, back and forth. Krista, when Reddington said, I was like, oh yeah, that's good. And then Sprague gets up and, to me, both seem plausible and nobody really knows the answer. Your thoughts?
You know, I feel that way about a lot of the evidence in this case, because I too thought the same thing. And, I thought that Reddington did a great job in his closing all the way. And then, I'm hearing a very different approach to the closing from the prosecution that laid out this timeline that was really fantastic. I loved how Reddington used the journal to show the psychosis, though. I think it was a little bit more effective. But the problem that the prosecution has is when you have two plausible theories, two things that make sense, two things that are completely understandable, and I can believe both of them, and I understand both of them, that is at the core reasonable doubt. And so when you talk about how all of this evidence shows this, but it also shows that, that is reasonable doubt. And that's why I wouldn't discount that as one of the possibilities here. And this is true with the experts as well. I think that both sides had very stellar experts. They both looked at the evidence and got to different conclusions. Both seem reasonable. If they're both reasonable, that is reasonable doubt.
They did. And in some jurisdictions, including California, the jury instruction is very clear. If there are two reasonable explanations for the same thing, you must go with the defense in that scenario. Rick, what did you think of the journal? Move the needle either way?
So I think at that point in time, I think the jury had enough of a grasp. They had a pre-charge before they heard the evidence. They heard all the evidence, and then they had a subsequent charge with respect to the mental health issues. And now they're hearing closings. And I think at that point in time, whether consciously or subconsciously, they're leaning one direction or the other. So it's gathering bricks and which way you're leaning. And as we both said, they're getting split. There's evidence on both sides of these. But as we just heard, the important thing is for what the Commonwealth believes a win is, needs 12. And traditionally thought of as a defense win is a hung jury, and you need one.
Yeah. And in this case, Cody Thomas, a lot of people think that is where we're going, a hung jury.
Yeah. I mean, I'm monitoring the chat, as you know, Ted, here. And first of all, I echo the same sentiments from Rick and Krista here as far as, when you have two plausible explanations. And Krista knows, we've talked about it for weeks, how I feel like almost every piece of evidence in this case can be looked at plausibly on either side. I mean, you look at it, well, like you said, Ted, you're listening to the closing about the journal, it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And then prosecution gets up there and it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense too. But to Krista and Rick's point, I mean, when it's like that, that is reasonable doubt. We know the legal standard here is beyond a reasonable doubt on behalf of the prosecution. And as Rick was just saying, I mean, their win is all 12 versus the defense's win would be 1. But as I'm monitoring the chat here, Ted, I'm looking at one of the polls we have up now. It's been up for 44 minutes, about 25,000 votes. 75% of those votes, people think the prompt is, what will your verdict be? People are saying not criminally responsible. But to the point of, what we were talking about, Ted, both sides, plausible things, that just shows how split this thing could be. And so if we're thinking about that, if people across the country on this chat are thinking about that, imagine what that jury's thinking back there. So I feel like a hung jury could be it could be highly likely here. I'm not saying either way, but I could for sure see that happening.
Yeah, just past the 7-hour mark in deliberations. Let's get another commercial break. We'll continue our rolling coverage of Verdict Watch in the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. Back after this.
When you consider the journals, I don't know, you ever watched the movie there, The Shining, with Jack Nicholson? Remember the scene when he's sitting there in a state of complete psychosis, and he's writing a book, and he's typing, and the wife finds the book and opens it up and looks at it and says, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Repeated after repeated after repeated. And he says, do you like it? You look at the records of her Googling drugs. You look at how many times, how many hours of the night in the afternoon she's looking this stuff up, in between taking care of the family, in between all of the stuff that was going on with visiting doctors, seeing doctors, going to Rhode Island, being told, no, we can't help you, calling a suicide hotline, we can't help you, calling another suicide hotline, we can't help you. My God, what does she have to do? She was reaching out for help, and she was not getting it.
Kevin Reddington comparing his client to Jack Nicholson in The Shining during her downward spiral in closing argument. 7 hours and 5 minutes. Our continuing coverage of deliberations continues here on Court TV and the 2 YouTube channels, Court TV YouTube and the Law and Crime YouTube channel as well, the Trials channel. With us, Rick Grundy, Krista Ramey, Cody Thomas. What did you think of The Shining? If you've seen the movie, if Jack Nicholson's a raving lunatic, we don't want our client to come across that way, but we do right in that minute, in those 18 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't get to see the jury, and I'm a little on the age side with Kevin Reddington, so I hope everybody knew what he was talking about. He explained it enough, I guess, for those who weren't. But again, you know, get away from it, what they've been hearing. You know, don't rush repeat what they've heard in the evidence. Bring a little life to it, a little dramatic reading by Kevin. Can't hurt.
Yeah, Krista, your thoughts on the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy? Because that wasn't quite the moment in that movie, if you saw the movie.
Well, and I think that The Shining is prolific enough where I think most people would have gotten it. And I don't know. I think that, and in fact, I think I recall hearing that the reporting on this from maybe Sarah Gillespie that the jurors are not necessarily younger in this case, so maybe they got it. And I think when you come up with these analogies as a lawyer, you do try to find something that will fit, but you also want the jury to understand. So hopefully it landed, because it did with me. I actually did understand it, and in that moment, because that was certainly a very good analogy, to demonstrate the psychosis and how it was manifesting, and it could be visualized if you were just looking out for it. So I did like the analogy myself.
Yeah, it was bubbling, and he was out there writing just like she was out there Googling. We could figure out if it landed, because there are a couple jurors that are in their late 20s, early 30s. So, Cody, you ever seen The Shining? He's going to be our test here.
I knew y'all were going to ask me. Don't age me out of this conversation just because I'm a little 30-year-old TV boy, but I've seen it, and I think that was a better comparison than him saying, here's Lindsay. That would not have probably connected as well as he would have wanted it to connect here. But I think, as Krista was saying, I think it's prolific enough to where enough people would understand what he was saying. I think I love a pop culture reference. People that watch me on my hours on here on the network know I make one every now and then. So I think it was a rightful comparison, and people in the chat are responding, saying, here's Lindsay, here's Johnny situation. Again, that poll still 75%, about 30,000 votes now of her not being criminally responsible. But another topic, Ted, I want to bring up here as I'm watching the chat here. People are bringing up the idea of Lindsay's personal responsibility. I know we touched on that earlier this hour, of her, not being as truthful as she should be with her psychiatrist, things like that. So, I mean, that's a topic of discussion here now.
Yep, need a break. We're going to get you back. We're going to continue our coverage right after this. Stay with us.
hip-hop's most infamous murder. 30 years later, finally in court.
Take me in there, send me to prison. This is wrong. There's lots of corroborating evidence in those case files.
The Tupac Shakur murder trial on Court TV.
Homeowners, are you really covered?
You have your home fire insurance, flood insurance, accident insurance. But how about your plumbing, your electrical, your appliances?
Choice Home Warranty can help.
All right, just in case anybody is watching or listening, I'm going to cut it here. I just got back. I don't think, well, they're going to probably hit lunch, if not already. And then I'll check again afterwards to see where it's happening or what's happening. And then obviously, if there's a verdict, I will come back for sure. But if there's any activity, I'll let you know and I'll come back.